From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We are joined, as always, with our super producer, Andrew Triforce Howard. Most importantly, you are you. You are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. Oh, man. Look, folks, fellow conspiracy realists, fart all you want. If you're farting right now, we can't hear it.
We can feel it, though.
But if you've got your phone in your pocket, somebody probably can.
Yes.
Have you seen the amazing videos? Sometimes it's done with pets, sometimes with humans, where someone will basically go up to a sleeping dog or a sleeping person and put a microphone by their butt that's connected to a speaker and put the speaker right by their head. And then when they fart, it like wakes them up with a start. It's pretty funny.
I like the heat signature studies. Got really into farts a few years ago. Sounds weird. Because of our job and in the course of our strange careers, we learn a lot of weird trivia, right?
Is that when we learned about how much money that one lady was making jarring her farts?
That's part of it. There's also le pétillement, a flatulist of note.
Not the same as a flautist. It's different.
Different. Still woodwind.
That's true.
Wind, at least. Here's one of the weird facts we learned. Not a factoid, an actual true thing. The average person farts 17 to 23 times a day. So if you meet someone who says they don't fart, either they are lying to themselves or to you.
And if you're a quality human being, you're writing it down along with a note about its intensity and tone.
And posting it.
We should get those clickers psychologists use where you just click and then we can all check for like a week. Like, guys, I'm averaging 24. I'm a little nervous.
That's coming with relentless medical surveillance. And we don't know what to do with this fact about how often the average human farts, but now it haunts you as well. So maybe you will get a clicker. Maybe you will count. Maybe you will do that kind of relentless self-examination Ben Franklin did.
I have an idea. They should make like an attachment for your fitness tracker that goes,
That goes where?
I don't know, man. I'm not
Nothing
the expert
invasive.
here. I'm just spitballing the idea.
There's probably technology already nascent, if not emergent, that can simply monitor flexes in your overall body when you expel wind. So it doesn't have to be up the butt, but that should be an option for the interested consumer.
Absolutely.
So tonight's episode is something we mentioned in a strange news segment years back. It's our cheeky exploration of, well, butts and guts. Yeah.
And coconuts.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Just so. Fecal transplants, the future of poop. We have an important announcement before we dive in. Fellow conspiracy realists, none of this is medical advice. Did you hear the comment at the end?
Yeah, it was deafening.
Is that where there's going to be a fart sound effect? Like right after you say, none of this is medical advice.
Perfect. Nice save. But I think it's fair we could say, folks, feel free to use all of our crappy puns.
I won't allow it.
Okay. Well, don't tell Noel when you send along your own.
That's cool. Do what thou wilt.
Everyone except for Humorous Harry.
That guy's a war criminal.
Regular Kissinger. Here are the facts. Before we talk about transplants at all, we got to ask a question that gets asked in clubs around Atlanta often. What's up with them guts?
No, I hate that. God,
I do
hate that
too.
expression.
I do too. I don't co-sign it, but it has proliferated.
It's aggressive to the extreme.
And
but you know what? I think it's appropriate for our scientific and very highbrow exploration of these things. But if that's a pickup line, get out of here.
Yeah, that's a flag so red that even someone like me could see it. You know what I mean? That's fire engine red flag.
So, guys, one of the first things that that I ever learned at How Stuff Works back when we were little babies and we were just learning things and being excited was this concept that the human body is made up of more microbes than it is made up of human cells. Wasn't that one of the things we learned early on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, just the concept of like our bodies not only being a temple, but also being a teeming ecosystem of weird little bacterium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it gives us a great opportunity to thank our innards, which we know sounds a bit visceral, literally, but for most people, if you're hale and hearty and in good health, you probably don't think about your inner world too often unless you get a stomach ache or you're hungry or you need to use the washroom. But the entire time you're up top, the North Pole of your body, is ignoring that lower inner soldier. Your gut is saving the day, and the whole process is entirely bizarre.
Oh, it's super bizarre. It's gross, too. It is really gross to think about our insides. What is that thing? It's the smell of death that people often describe has mostly to do with the bacteria and stuff that's in your guts after death when that stuff gets expelled, or especially if someone's been in a war scenario or something and their bodies have been opened, the cause of death includes that. That's the stuff that's in there is just gross.
Yeah. Well,
gross but functional.
Yeah, gross but functional. I like that. You know what I mean? Like a Honda Odyssey. Speaking with Wired, Marissa Scavuzzo, who is at the time a postdoc researcher for Case Western Reserve University in Ohio, said, "Look, digestion is required for survival. We, the animals, do it every day, but also if you really think about it, it sounds foreign. It sounds alien from the moment you eat a snack." Whatever you're eating now as you hear this, to the second it leaves your body, from the North Pole to your Australia or your Antarctica, your gut is working around the clock, always on overtime, just like how your heart beats, and you're never thinking about how it breaks stuff down. It differentiates between the good stuff and the bad stuff. It moves things through this amazing Wonka-esque factory of digestion, right? Your mouth, your esophagus, stomach, through the intestines, little family circus route.
The kidneys filtering out all the bad stuff, or as much as possible. That's why, sure, you can live with one kidney, but I wouldn't exactly recommend it.
You can survive with one.
Yeah. Well, and then all that we were talking about soldiers here, right? All the tiny little bits and pieces, the cells that actually do that differentiation and then carry the good nutrients in through the lining of your walls in your intestines that do that differentiation. That stuff is, I don't see how it's not magic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because science is very good at answering the how of a thing, but doesn't really approach the why of the thing. We know how something, like, this is a painfully astute comparison or analog. Your gut has this entire network of things that sort of legally migrate the good things, the nutrients, the good bacteria, and then kind of function as customs or passport control for the bad stuff that will kill you if you don't poop it out.
Right, because the good bacteria is part of the stuff that breaks down that food, right, as it's going through your body, like especially towards the end in the intestines.
Well, yeah, and consuming like probiotic stuff like yogurt and kefir and all that, it helps kind of maintain that gut flora, so that you actually are able to properly break those things down.
Mm-hmm. And this involves a Herculean amount of organization and coordination across multiple cell types and tissues, muscle cells, immune cells, blood cells, lymphatic vessels. The real heroes we'll see are the nerve cells and the bacterial cells. When you think of your gut, what you should think instead of gross is the immediate two words. 1, unappreciated. 2, mysterious.
I would largely disagree with unappreciated. But I guess maybe at large. But I appreciate the heck out of my gut and butts. I have more than one of each, apparently.
Oh, you also have a double brain. Most
That's
humans
right.
do, kind
There
of.
you go. See, that's what I was doing. I was setting that up for you, Ben.
Nice with the segue. This is startling. I heard a great piece on NPR about this earlier when I was on a road trip. If you're human, your butt kind of has a second brain. It's not like the old thing about, remember the stuff about the Stegosaurus? How the Stegosaurus was so large that it had to have a second kind of nerve center at its lower back or lower vertebrae.
Well, it's what we might call like a lo-fi brain. You know, doesn't have all the features. It's a little bit more kind of on off.
Mm-hmm. What's the fancy name for this old double brain?
Well, the fancy name for it is the enteric nervous system, which consists of sheaths of neurons that run through all of your intestines, pretty much from stem to stern, or as my favorite movie reviewers from YouTube say, rooter to tutor. It's called fish jelly. You guys should check them out. They're delightful. Anywho, that means from your esophagus to your anus.
Right. And we call it a second brain because although it's not contained in one central location, organ-wise, we're talking about 100 million neurons. That's more than either in the spinal cord or in the entirety of the peripheral nervous system.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
But it almost is more of just like a more robust kind of sensor. Like it's right. It's more like say like a security system than it is like a CPU.
Yeah, think of it as, if we're looking at the body as production, think of it as your assistant director.
There you go.
You know what I mean? It's got the goals, it's got the stuff it needs to do and the stuff it needs to avoid. It's what enables the human body to feel the inner world of the gut and all the contents within. And again, it continually coordinates digestion. It controls reflexes and senses on its own. Your up top, like your quote, quote, brain doesn't need to take notes. It's outsourced this to a wide world below the clavicle. But Noel, there's something fascinating you raised. I love, again, the term lo-fi brain, because your second brain isn't really like writing poetry for you.
Exactly. Like it's more like it's a little less flexible. It kind of like has its programming, kind of does its one thing and doesn't really have to bob and weave too much.
It makes me think about how sometimes, well, especially during pregnancy, it's almost as if the body is telling you what you need to eat, and then the cravings will occur. So it's completely independent of your thought processes, right? Or if often people who need iron in their diet because they're iron deficient will have this craving for something that is rich in iron. And it does make me wonder if that's the system that's responding.
I would agree with that. It absolutely is. It's almost, in some ways, it's similar to the earlier discussions about the bicameral mind. You have this whole other thing that it has a lot in common with a brain, and it is just providing cravings, determining intention or influencing action. And it's not sending you, a nice collegiate email saying, hey, checking in. It's me from, your guts. And I have an opinion about what you should eat right now. Instead, some sunny afternoon, maybe you're carrying a child. You just go, I need pickles. I need them with ice cream. And I need it now.
Mm-hmm. Or in my Dr. Pepper.
In my Dr. Pepper.
Exactly. And it could be a specific thing like vinegar would be useful, right? Or something fermented would be useful or whatever. And it just happens to work out that way. And you see something when you're grocery shopping, you're just like, I don't know why, but I need that right now.
Michael Gershon agrees with us. This is the chairman of the Department of Anatomy and Cell Biology at New York Presbyterian Hospital / Columbia University Medical Center. Just picture how big that guy's business card has to get as the title gets longer. Dr. Gershon says the second brain doesn't help with the great thought processes, religion, philosophy, and poetry. It's left to the brain and the head, but that is just one aspect of the amazing gut biology at play. Again, if you're human, your digestive system, the second brain running that you've outsourced to, it contends with another stakeholder, which was mentioned earlier, the vast multi-species metropolis of bacterial life that have a fascinating, still not widely understood microbiome that pretty much does everything. Because as cool as the second brain or this other nervous system is, it cannot function without bacteria. It cannot function without these non-human life forms living inside you.
And we've begun to learn a whole lot more about this whole system and how these systems function together, because there are really smart people out there who are studying it. And there are a lot of people making companies based off of some of the science that's being discovered and tested.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the growing field of medical ecology. It approaches the body's microbiome as almost like a garden. You know what I mean? Like there are different, we said gut flora, so there are different small living things within you. Some are nurtured, right? Like the good plants in the garden, and some are weeded out.
Well, yeah, but that's like a really good comparison, though, the whole garden thing, because as we know, like composting is a huge part of maintaining, or can be rather, a huge part of maintaining a really healthy garden ecosystem. You put in stuff, it basically rots in the ground and ferments and breaks down and then becomes nutrients.
Mm-hmm. It's the circle of poop life.
Indeed.
Which was the original title of that Lion King song. No one fact check us.
But it is a really, really good example, Ben, or a way to picture it in your mind, because I can see just somebody who is actively planting a bunch of different vegetables out in their garden, and there are weeds, and they're trying to control the weeds. But as we're going to get into this, like one of the main reasons why this technology is so important is because when it's time to harvest no, that doesn't really work. But when you take out those plants that you do want, the weeds can take over pretty quickly.
Matt, off mic, we were trying to, all three of us, figure out the name of this kind of sustainable type of gardening method that basically involves just letting things grow, including the weeds. It's permaculture.
Well done, Noel. Yes, permaculture. And thank you to our fellow conspiracy realists who have written to us, who are familiar with this industry or proselytizers thereof. This comparison, this inner and outer world matching, it speaks to a growing field of what's called medical ecology. This approaches the body's microbiomes as a community of life forms that need to be nurtured or at times excised. And yes, fellow horticulturists, we are well aware that weed is kind of I don't want to say fraudulent, but it's kind of a convenient term. A weed is defined as anything you don't want in that area.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, and it can be like an aesthetic issue where people just think it's ugly or it like chokes, the pretty stuff. But it does grow for a reason, and it is not necessarily like a foreign invader, right? Like it actually is. The whole deal with permaculture is planting things that make sense in the ecosystem, the natural ecosystem that actually exists, and also thinking about human needs. So, I mean, sometimes you do end up killing things that maybe you shouldn't be killing and that are kind of part of the ecosystem.
Yeah. A good example of what permaculture fights against would be, the metropolitan area of Las Vegas, not too many decades ago, wherein people planted all of these sorts of grasses and other plant forms that simply weren't supposed to be in that environment.
Right. And the term biodiversity comes into play, too, because weeds, quote unquote, to your point, Matt, can absolutely contribute to the biodiversity of a garden and attract fauna like pollinators. And they can also actually contribute to having a better balance of nutrients in the soil. So a lot of times people pulling the weeds just creates more weeds and actually messes up the balance of the ecosystem.
Yeah, I think when I think about weeds, I think about something that proliferates extremely rapidly and spreads really fast. So like it's something that will take over Again, in the way that some bad bacteria will take over a microbiome in your guts, like that, real fast.
Given the opportunity. Yeah, absolutely. And some of what these pioneers of medical ecology have discovered is inspiring. It is literally life-saving. Some of what they've discovered is also kind of terrifying. Maybe, what do you think, guys? Should we pause for a word from our sponsors before we dig into the strangest parts of this hot, steaming pile of research?
Gross. If we must.
Here's where it gets crazy. All right, a fecal transplant. Fancy name, fecal microbiota transplantation.
Quick question, Ben. Why? I know that's what we're here to discuss, but I immediately am like, who's asking for this? Who is this for? This sounds like some rich, bored people stuff.
Who pitched it first?
Well, don't we know that it went way back to this stuff called yellow soup?
Oh, it goes before yellow soup. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It goes way back. 4th century CE is the first mention recorded in medical literature. In ancient China, we know that Bedouins also apparently used fresh camel feces later to combat dysentery.
Whoa.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, dysentery is a pretty serious thing, so I guess any port in a storm, yeah?
No matter how stinky.
So how, why, right? To your earlier question, Noel, how, why, who pitched this? We have to check a few facts about bacteria. You know, your body is absolutely riddled with it. Bacteria are arguably one of, if not the most successful forms of life in the planet, right? They're extremophiles in deep sea vents. You can bury them far underground and they're just fine until you get into an outbreak situation. And they're all over humans. We used to think that the lungs had no bacteria in them. Your lungs house about 2,000 species, 2,000 separate species of bacteria per square centimeter.
Did they do an animated children's movie yet about like the secret life of gut flora? Because that should happen.
Oh, that's a great idea.
I know there's like Osmosis Jones, which was like not a big hit, but I want a Pixar movie about this. I think it is well deserved.
Yeah, you heard it here first, Pixar. That's a great idea. We ask for a reasonable 15%.
Oh, no. This is not a hot take. Someone has thought about this. I just want to see it happen, guys. I don't want any credit. I just want to see the movie. Please, Pixar. Guys, surely you've got a pitch about this already in your stacks.
Yeah, so you think that's weird, right? 2,000 species of these weird little creepy crawlies inside your lungs, the thing that you do every moment, right? Breathing them in, breathing them out. No, they're just in there hanging out.
Breathe in, breathe out.
Yeah, but then think about just on your skin, on your face, on your hands, on your feet. Well, what about on your lips?
Well, I mean, the operative word is micro. You know, we're not going to sense these things. They are beyond our threshold of feelings. You know, they're so tiny, but yet there they are doing their thing. And like the idea, you know, when I think of breathing something like this, and I think of like swallowing a bug, but let's compare like the size of a bug that one could breathe in and swallow to the size of a gut bacteria. It's like a kaiju versus like a Smurf.
Yeah, it's comparatively almost quark level, and that's a terrifying idea too. Can you imagine being intimately aware of every instance of a microorganism like this in your body? You go crazy.
You'd go bananas. Yeah. You'd claw your eyes out.
There would be no more humans because we would all stop having intercourse, like immediately.
Everybody who should have intercourse would stop, but the only people left would be, you know, some pretty extremophiles of their own. I mean, the mouth, to that point, it's got hundreds of thousands of species of these things. You can't feel them. The mouth is weirdly colonized. There are neighborhoods of very different species across your teeth. Feel it when we're telling you this, folks.
Of course was immediately, Ben. Happened the moment you spoke it.
Oh, geez. It's on our tongues. Our tongues are their own neighborhood.
Yep. And it doesn't stop there, and it just keeps going. Sorry.
Yeah, but I mean, like, we've talked a little bit about, I think it was on Ridiculous History maybe, about the discovery of, microscopic particles and bacteria. The idea of like things spoiling, I know what it was. It was an episode where we were talking about the concept of like, do the things that cause food to go bad, are they external or are they created from within the thing themselves? And of course it was determined that they are in fact external. There's like bacteria out there in the world that is attracted to stuff and just comes in because of various experiments involving flasks with the top open or with like a bent little segment in the flask that cause different results. But like, can we talk a little bit about like who and when was it determined that these things exist? Like, I mean, who decided to like look inside the mouth, and at what point did we get advanced enough we could truly look inside the gut and not just kind of posit this stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this goes back in step with the microscope, which allowed humans to see very small things. It dates back to the 1600s, I believe, with Leeuwenhoek.
That's right. Leeuwenhoek was a lens maker and, while not the inventor of the microscope, was someone who definitely made some significant advancements in lens technology. But in Western literature, I actually found this abstract on ScienceDirect.com from a study called The Origins of Gut Microbiome Research in Europe. And in the abstract, it says, in Western literature, the discovery of the gut microflora originates around the 1840s. And by the last 2 decades of the 19th and early 20th centuries, the study, characterization, and here's for our purposes today, even therapeutic use of, quote, protective microbes reached its scientific peak in France and German-speaking Europe.
Mm. And additionally, in earlier evenings, we know, shout out to the practitioners of Jainism, because Jainism way back in the day said maybe there are tiny things that influence us of which we are unaware. We're somehow unable to see them.
Well, thank God our like gut bacteria aren't like whispering to us, telling us to do bad things.
Weirdly possible, as we'll see. I mean, there's so many, and it's kind of like, it's almost a hierarchy. If you are standing up right now, we know your mouth has a lot of stuff. You go down, your lungs have a lot of stuff. And then you go down to your gut. Your gut can have as many as 25,000 to 30,000 different species of gut flora, of microorganisms, of bacteria and fungi and protozoa. They get you young, cradle to grave. They start colonizing the bowel in infancy, which is, I believe, part of why newborns poop differently.
Oh, yeah. That's black tar stuff that comes out. And that's also why breastfeeding is thought to be so important, because the mother transfers her gut biome essentially and all of her bacteria into the child.
Mm. And we also know that these helpers for the human body, they appear to be mission critical with the immune system and with the repression of pathogens. Your body right now contains 10 times more bacterial cells than it does human cells. Granted, there's a size difference. Human cells are going to be bigger than bacterial cells generally.
Yeah, but it's what's the phrase we always used to use? We are universes, or what is it? Something about how we're cities or something. Each human is a city, or each human is an entire universe.
Yeah. And not every human gut obviously has the whole like Pokemon collection of the good backies. I don't know. Yeah, right. I don't know if we can or should. Also, I don't know if Backy works as a pet name for bacteria.
I think Backy has been already used for like an old-timey Southern name for tobacco.
All right.
I think we might have gotten beaten to the punch on that by the old timers, by the old prospectors of the world. But I
vote that we say Backy, though. I like it as bacteria.
I just think bacteria is fun to say. I just see no reason to shorten it. I really enjoy the mouthfeel of bacteria as a word.
No, I was just thinking about the bacteria in my mouth. Thanks, Noel. Jeez.
Exactly. Well, I mean, no, to your point too, Ben, about like your body being this like microcosmic kind of universe or macrocosmic, whatever. I mean, that applies on so many levels, as you can think about it, like in terms of like the mind and all of the thoughts within thoughts and dreams within dreams and all of the different like motivations at play. But you can also take it super mega literally. Like there are things living inside of us that we will never fully be able to comprehend, at least outside of like the scientific realm, but they really do kind of have a life of their own.
Yeah. And the life that they live tends to, when everything works out, help the human beings. It's not a stretch to wonder whether these same life forms can mitigate inflammation-associated disorders, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, IBD, maybe IBS. In some cases, there's some promising research, or I should say some fascinating research indicating that your biome, to your earlier point, Noel, may influence your mood and some aspects of your psychology.
Well, sure. I mean, if you're constipated, you're not going to be particularly cheerful.
And as Snickers said, you're not you when you're hungry.
Also true.
Was that Snickers?
May as well have been. It's as good a Snickers tagline as any.
You gotta eat.
You gotta eat.
You gotta eat Snickers.
Shout out to Checkers and Snickers. Get together, you guys. So we talked earlier about how when you think past the surprising, shocking headlines, it's not really that amazing or that surprising to find that the idea of transplanting poop using a natural human biological product to address a medical condition, it's not surprising to learn that this is an ancient idea.
And what a weird idea it was. So back in the 4th century, some folks noticed that there were a lot of people around them getting super sick. Think diarrhea, throwing up, just stuff where the human beings are clearly sick and the bad stuff's coming out of their mouths via vomit and via their rears. Are you saying
they were sliding into first and they were feeling something burst?
Yes, well,
okay.
Sure.
I'm just making sure. We're talking about diarrhea. Okay, good.
Diarrhea is one of those things that we've talked about on this show before and many times over the years with how stuff works, how serious it actually is still today, how serious diarrhea can be. But back in the day, especially if you have a bad bout of it, you could die pretty easily. Because it can lead to other things. It can make you even more sick when you're dealing with bacteria now that's on the exterior of your body as it's being expelled, and others who are doing that same thing around you perhaps, as well as the thing that happens when you lose a lot of the moisture in your body, right? You become dehydrated from this thing. Well, back in the 4th century, somebody had the idea of something's wrong with this person who's got diarrhea, right? It's happening inside their body. There's nothing wrong with these people over here. Why don't we take some of their expelled poop and stuff and turn it into a soup of sorts and feed that to the people who have problems?
No,
right?
This is a real leap, Matt. This is a real leap.
Or boof them.
Sometimes boofing, but it was like a...
At first it was,
Yeah.
It was a soup. And this also, I appreciate that point because this reminds us again, in these days, in the 4th century CE and for hundreds of years after, a lot of what informed medicine is what we would call sympathetic magic today, right? The like can treat the like. Within the poison, we find the antidote.
It's how the first vaccinations happened, right? Take the pus and put it in somebody else.
It's a true story. If you fast forward still in ancient China up to the 1500s, then you'll see a notable man of old medicine, a Chinese physician, herbalist, and acupuncturist named Li Shizhen. And he's the one who gave us the term that I think we all enjoy.
It's going to make me think about Massaman curry differently.
I was thinking about curry too, man. All right.
I don't like any of this. You guys. But see, when I think of a transplant, though, I do think of I'm sorry, I'm a child, I guess, but sticking it in where it comes from, kind of.
Right.
But it also, doesn't a transplant also kind of involve removing something and replacing it with something else?
Well, in this case, the patients that have severe diarrhea are kind of
They don't really need any help removing it.
Yeah, they ran the first part. Yeah, they made the space.
So they're definitely sliding into third. I'm sorry, I'm not. Just look up the song. It's a delightful little bop.
So the phrase our pal Li Shishen used translates to yellow soup, and sometimes he said golden syrup. Depending on the preparation of the stool or the feces. Is it fresh, dried? Ferment it for a little while, dig it back up, put it in someone. Let's see if it helps their tummy.
Well, here's why this is important, though. People at that time, as they're experimenting basically in this way, found that folks were getting better. Whether that's some people were getting better on their own, whether that was actually this form of medicine was better than a placebo back in the 4th century, who knows? But it does seem like it caught on enough and it was thought enough of a real remedy that humans continued experimenting with it.
Mm-hmm. Which at this point means not that many people were instantly dying.
Yes.
Sort of like, mercury treatments killed people, and which is why people didn't keep practicing it for as long as they were practicing some version of fecal transplant. Let's go to 1958. Let's meet our guy, Dr. Ben Eisman, who must have been pretty interesting. He is the doctor who set the precedent for the modern fecal transplant, and he actually saved 4 folks' lives in doing so.
That's right. Eisman and a team of surgeons. And yes, we're saying surgeons, but lest you worry, fecal transplants don't typically involve cutting people open. But they were involved in this. They were in Colorado. They treated 4 critically ill people with fecal enemas to combat a super nasty condition called fulminant pseudomembranous colitis. I think I got that one okay.
Nailed it.
Which we now know is caused by something that is colloquially often referred to just as C. diff, which stands for Clostridium difficile, I believe is how that's pronounced. C. difficile or just C. diff.
Got the C. diff. Yeah.
I always pronounce it difficile because I think in Spanish when I see it.
Or difficile.
But you guys are fancier than me.
No. We're all just in the same boat trying to avoid that C. diff.
Yep.
And folks, it is serious. We're about to dive into it, but unfortunately, statistically, several of us in the audience this evening have had some sort of experience with this mean little life form. After our buddy Dr. Eisman hits the scene, fecal transplant research and procedure kind of wanes. It occurs successfully in later decades, but it's kind of sporadic. It's not the first thing your medical practitioner thinks about. Or if it is, they might have their own thing going on. The streets are watching, though. This technique proves time and time and time again to be successful, combating medical issues caused by C. diff in particular. And people start asking whether this can help address other infections as well.
Exactly. So this pseudomembranous colitis thing is so weird and crazy and gross. It is when this C. diff bacteria, it starts basically breaking down the lining of your colon, stuff called the mucosa. And when it starts breaking it down, it creates these like scabs imagine scabs inside the lining of your colon and like the lower intestines down there. And then your white blood cells go in to attack some of the stuff and some of the bad bacteria and some of the parts down there. And you can get sepsis from this. You can get all kinds of really bad infections. So sepsis would be like infection in your blood, and the other one is that your body is basically attacking itself.
Yeah, making a feedback loop.
Exactly. And the reason why the C. diff is so difficult to fight often is because an infection of this type of bacteria often arises after we've taken antibiotics. So specific rounds of antibiotics that kill a lot of the microbiome, the good bacteria that's in us. So like the weeds, as we were talking about in that example, right, that metaphor there, in the way we're talking about our bodies as gardens and some of these bacteria as weeds, those weeds proliferate because they often don't get killed by the antibacterial stuff that we're putting through our whole system. So they just are everywhere. and they grow out of control.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to take a pause for a word from our sponsor, and we'll dive into maybe some specific stories, and we'll take a deeper look at the problem that makes C so difficile. We've returned. All right, this is the story that I think stood out to a lot of us outside of the medical professional community back in 2012. Caitlin Hunter, a resident of our home state of Georgia, based in Marietta, goes to visit her father in California. Fortunately, she has a brutal automobile accident, fractures her lower, this is in 2011, fractures her lower spine, lacerates her liver and colon, breaks all 10 of her toes, which is just, at that point, insult on injury.
Jeez.
10
toes down, indeed.
Indeed, yes, sir. And she is treated, in California. She does survive the horrors of this car accident. And then, because she is in a hospital, similar to being in an elder care facility, where these are the places where C. diff opportunistically proliferates, she gets a life-threatening bacterial infection in her colon and doesn't quite clock it until she leaves the medical facility in California and returns to Georgia.
And we have a quote from her in speaking with CNN. Here's the quote. Right when I got off the plane, I went to the hospital. I was having extremely bad stomach pain. A month later, we found out it was C. diff.
Yeah, which is just terrible. All the usual treatments for this infection seem ineffective, right? We're hitting the antibiotics left and right. For a time, it appears that Hunter may have lived through this accident only to die from knock-on consequences. Luckily, her physician at the time, Dr. Suku George, is a very sharp cookie and starts thinking outside the box.
Right. He figures since antibiotics can also kill good bacteria, why not fight a little fire with fire? What if the answer is actually not to kill bacteria, but to introduce more bacteria, more of the good bacteria, the good stuff kids go for.
The good baddies.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Hunter's mother is all up for the challenge and decides she will donate some of that good bacteria herself in the form of a poop.
And one of the reasons why the doctors were scared, why the mother chose to do this kind of strange thing, right? Donate my poop to put it into my daughter. This stuff, C. diff, infects around 500,000 Americans, like human beings in America every year, and it kills somewhere between 14 and 30,000 Americans every year, just depending on the year and depending on what kind of outbreak there's been.
Yeah, a good friend of mine, and I think for Ben's as well, friend of the show, was just messaging me, actually. I just happened to catch it and said, I can't talk right now. We're talking about poop transplants. And she said, my friend got one of those because he almost died of C. diff and it saved his life. So confirming this is absolutely a thing that to this day is hugely impactful on people's lives.
And let's talk a little bit. Let's put on our old alma mater hats for how stuff works and talk about how this functions. Okay, so good news, or for some kind of very specific people, maybe this is disappointing news. You're not like pooping in a doctor's hand and then having the doctor run to the next room and then just boof up the patient.
Let down.
Well, but in 1958, it was an enema, right?
It was an enema. And enemas are still used, what are called retention enemas. The way it usually works now, you screen a donor for whether it's a family member, a partner, or a stranger, you screen them for any other kind of disease-causing germ, any communicable infection. The doctor takes this stool sample, they dilute it with saline, or get this, 4% milk, and then they blend it into what is honestly kind of like a milkshake.
It's not for drinking, though. Doesn't it go into capsules? Isn't that the idea?
It's a poop shake. It doesn't have to go in the capsules. They used to use nasogastric or nasoduodenal tubes. The only difference is going, through your nasal cavity or going even deeper
Right.
into your innards.
Isn't that similar to how if you're like not able to eat solid food and you're in the hospital, can't they also feed you that way?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sometimes they'll go through your side, basically. But in this case, like, imagine poop going through a tube that is going into your nose all the way down to your system.
The first question I think is on many people's minds is, but do you smell it immediately? I mean, I guess it's contained within a tube.
Yeah.
But who knows?
They probably put you out for it.
Ah, that's true.
Also, there is similar technology used for, to your point, Noel, force feeding in black sites.
Maybe that's where I've seen it.
Of course, yeah, the retention enema was used, as you point out, Matt, by Dr. Eisman. I believe now the primary preferred delivery method it's through the colon.
Yeah. But they do offer pills. Like, you can swallow poop pills.
You can.
You can do it.
Please, again, remember this is not medical advice. I feel like we have to say that before people get not red pilled, but poop pilled.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're talking about the mother, right? Of course, this is an out of the usual procedure kind of thing for the Hunter family and for the doctor involved. Her mother does donate that stool sample, and they get it from her mother to minimize any possible unforeseen side effects. The idea being that the birth mother's gut flora will have a much higher likelihood of being familiar or being closer to the gut flora of the child.
Mm-hmm. It's a really good point. That's huge. It kind of goes back to the during pregnancy thing, right after giving birth, how important the milk is, how important, at least in a lot of studies, how important a vaginal birth is for getting the same kind of microbiome transfer, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we know that in 2012, March of 2012, studies conducted found astonishing numbers that seem to give credence to the philosophers and the sympathetic magic practitioners of old. They found 91% of patients with similar C. diff conditions were cured after just one transplant procedure. And then if you couple that, after the procedure, if you couple that with a round of the right antibiotics, your success rate shoots up to 98%, which is crazy for science.
Oh, it's insane. There was a trial in 2013 that they were conducting I think they were trying to see whether or not fecal transplantation would be as effective or not as effective versus, I can't remember the name. I think it's vancomycin or vancomycin,
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
And as they're going through this trial and they started to notice that the fecal transplant was so far superior to these intense drugs, they decided it would be unethical to continue the trial. So they were just, they stopped the trial and they said, which poop transplants for everybody.
You get a poop transplant and you get a poop transplant.
And Matt,
I love you don't get one.
Oh,
you can have one if you want as a treat.
You can have mine. I'll give you mine, Matt.
Guys, let's all share our poops.
No.
Just put coffee in my enema.
Good. I'm sure there's some real TikTok science behind that one.
Wait, that was a thing, wasn't it? Coffee enemas back in the day? Oh,
yeah,
man, you know
what?
In my head.
It must be John Harvey Kellogg probably was into that one. He was into yogurt enemas. That was but that's funny though, because that actually, now that you mention it, that's a similar thing. John Harvey Kellogg was all about the probiotics and all about the gut flora.
Yeah, now we're not saying he was a perfect guy.
We're also not saying squirt yogurt up your butt. We're not saying that.
Again, none of this is medical advice, but we are fun at parties.
Medical suggestions.
Observations. Folks, we know how people are. There's all kinds of woo-woo pseudoscience out there. I mean, on the flip side of that coin, or on the other butt cheek, the world is full of desperate people who are seeking remedy for otherwise intractable medical conditions.
Oh, so many people on the internet saying, I drink a gallon of my own urine every day. And that is, I believe, provably not a good idea.
Yeah, it's not the best.
No.
It's even worse than, soda, I think. Still dealing with this soda withdrawal, you guys. Gosh, soda's so great. But don't try this at home is our main thing we have to say, because feces is a level 2 biohazard. That is bad. If you don't test those samples, if you just try to, go out on some wildcat poop transferring, you could end up worse than you began.
Well, I mean, with the urine example, what happens? What is urine? What is feces? It is materials that have been excreted from your body because they're bad for you. So if you drink your own urine, you are drinking back down those unnecessary toxins, which is forcing your kidneys to process them again. Yeah. And perhaps work overtime. Let's just not take this into our own hands. I mean, obviously there are good reasons to have fecal transplants. The C. diff thing, very, very real. But as just some sort of holistic kind of woo-woo remedy, I would definitely seek a professional.
You just got to cut it with a little tequila and lime, and you're good to go. No,
the urine or the urine or the poo-poo?
Okay. The poop, to the point of the level 2 biohazard, go back in your mind and think about how, I guess, freaked out science was that there was so much coronavirus in the sewer systems of the United States in particular, when they were just noticing, there's a lot of active coronavirus swimming around in the poop leftovers.
Just living its best life.
Also, guys, I never hear talk about poop today, but I've just found so much stuff about pee-pee. Apparently, it's not sterile. People are always screaming about how it's sterile and you should pee on your jellyfish bite. That's just not true.
I believe the mechanism for the pee on the jellyfish thing is not due to sterility.
That's right. I'm sorry. Okay, so let's walk this back. You can definitely pee on your jellyfish thing. It does neutralize this thing, but it is not because of this thing. People are always screaming about how urine is quote unquote sterile. It's full of all kinds of bacteria in healthy urine.
Yeah. Just the way people used to believe that lungs didn't have their own little cities within them. I mean, this is also, there's good news. The Fecal Transplant Foundation, which is a real thing, has confirmed that there are not any documented cases of infection transmitted through FMT or these fecal transplantations. Still better safe than sorry. You know what I mean? And one thing we can say, if you're transplanting poop and you're not a doctor, just gaming this out, the biggest scenario would be the power move to go full chimpanzee, just poop in your hand and throw it at someone if you're about to be in a fight.
That will definitely make them go away and not try to fight you any further.
I would hope so.
And sorry, last thing about urine. Apparently the jellyfish thing, a folk remedy as well. And it actually might make it hurt worse. Sorry, thank you, poison.org.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You know what's not a folk remedy or a folk thing?
What's that?
When you get a toxic megacolon. You ever heard of that, boys?
No.
Yes.
That's from a C. diff infection. That is a very serious, real thing. It sounds like some kind of monster or, I don't know, horrible thing, but it is real. It's just when your colon gets super inflamed and enlarged, and that's one of the ways you get stuff like sepsis and horrible death,
which can escalate and exacerbate very quickly. They can become life-threatening conditions. And now this brings us to sort of the crux of our exploration. The future of poop. This is a question we were talking about a little bit off air. All right, it's a gig economy. Things are kind of dystopian, let's be honest.
Sure.
So could people begin donating poop for money, similar to other biological-based industries like sperm donation or, the horrors of the red market and the organ trade?
Please be yes. Please be yes.
The answer is yes.
Awesome. Because what am I going to do with the stuff?
It's kind of
Flush
American.
it.
I know, but I mean, maybe if instead of flushing it, I can go out and donate it every time, the plumbing system in my house will probably last a lot longer.
Now, the people who do get human waste for use in fertilizer through waste treatment plants,
sure,
they may have something to say about this, but imagine a world where you're short on scratch and you see a particular branded porta potty. You know what I mean? Poop for cash. I can see the infomercial now. If you go to places like humanmicrobes.org, there are multiple outfits like this, by the way. You'll see that as long as you fill out their questionnaire and pass a pretty rigorous screening, they will pay you to poop.
Yeah, unfortunately, because of the rigorous screening, it won't be as simple as sort of a reverse pay toilet. Maybe in the future, though, when they can just like scan you. But
right.
You know, I love the idea of just being able to sit down, do your business, and then money comes out at you.
Mm-hmm. I love the idea of of being the guy who meets my daughter's new boyfriend for the first time. I'm like, oh, so Daryl, what do you do? Oh, Daryl's a pooper, Dad.
Mm-hmm. Professional. He's got the best poop.
He's a pro poop. So, but if you do this with some of these outfits, there's no regulatory body right now saying how much, like what the going price is for a poop, but it's $500 per stool at humanmicrobes.org, up to 180 grand a year. And if you're what they call a super donor that they're still looking for.
Super pooper.
Yeah, super pooper, then the prices are negotiable.
Yeah.
Right on. You got the upper hand there, coming to that negotiation hot.
Dude, and there's so many of these programs that are popping up everywhere. Just another quick example, Good Nature is another program you can go to, goodnatureprogram.com, and learn about this, y'all. They have a stool donation program that if you live in Tempe, Arizona, or Irvine, California, you can head into their offices, poop several times a week, and make $1,500 a month.
That's a pretty respectable living.
US dollars, too.
And I mean, it's a lot easier to give. That's not saying give poop, just sounds weird. To donate your feces, and you could probably do it much more regularly than you could, say, plasma or blood.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and, you know, there are some blood cells in your poop, but details. So this is what's inspiring about this, despite the clear dystopian aspect of it, is it's literally turning, beat me here, it's literally turning shit into gold. You know what I mean? Pretty American.
Or at the very least, you know, dollars.
Oh, yeah. And just a couple more details, because this is so fascinating to me. If you were going to get in that Good Nature program, you would go 4 to 6 times a week to their offices. You would have a 1-hour visit per, plop, I guess. You would get monthly blood draws, and you have to not smoke, not have any issues with drugs or alcohol, be 18 to 50 years old, and just live near one of their centers.
And I think some other places also have increasingly robust genetic screening.
Oh, yeah.
We know that the example I mentioned earlier, humanmicrobes.org, I am very interested in the founder, Michael Harrop, Harrop, because if you go to their About page or you go to their FAQ and stuff, you'll see that they describe themselves as, quote, a stool donor network currently focused on the USA and Canada, but accepting stool donors from around the world and willing to do global dry ice shipping if possible.
Wow.
So you'll have to go to their office. If you got the right poop, they'll take care of it.
Dude, that's so awesome.
They do a lot of work with indigenous populations. The website is a rabbit hole because the idea is that these folks will be less likely to be exposed to certain contaminants because there's a growing crisis, apparently. And I'm sure we see this whenever we look at these donor networks.
Well, yeah, because like the other one, the Good Nature program has an R&D department where if you don't meet their rigorous health standards, you just donate to their R&D department so they can study your poop for like stuff that goes wrong in poop, I guess.
Mm-hmm. The FMT Foundation, the Fecal Transplant Foundation, found that only 0.1% of the population is still healthy enough to qualify as a high quality stool donor. What does that mean? I think they're talking about superbugs proliferating, overexposure to antibiotics, which, when you dose a bunch of livestock and you dose a bunch of humans with antibiotics, a lot of the good backies catch strays. They die in the crossfire.
Well, yeah, and they also have restrictions about weight. So they use the phrase normal weight on a couple of these, but that just means probably the BMI index, like you'd have to be in the green area or whatever.
And BMI is super flawed. Yeah.
Exactly. But it's still like, if you're using that as your metrics, I can see why it's 0.1%.
I'm also wondering if it's something to do with microplastics, which have
Ooh.
infiltrated everything. We still don't know what the long-term effects of those are going to be on overall human health. Not to sound too RFK Jr. about it. I like McDonald's cheeseburger as much as the next.
Yeah, but isn't it kind of like against RFK Jr.'s brand
Yes.
to be housing cheeseburgers? I was seeing people saying it's sort of like when the drug dealer makes the cop do some drugs to prove that he's not a cop.
Welcome to training day. Yeah, it also was it a power move because it was clearly a photo op? I don't know. That's a different story. The other knock on bad factor, our buddy C. Diff is making out like gangbusters. So if you need this kind of treatment, let's exercise empathy. Let's think of the people who don't have a willing family member or partner donor. If you can't get a family member, they'll often suggest looking toward your partner, because your partner also, by living with you, has a higher likelihood of not having, plot twist in their gut flora. But then, what if you can't get a poop plant procedure because you can't afford it with or without insurance? Insurance makes money in this country denying medical procedures.
It's true.
Is that fair to say?
It's more than fair to say.
Well, Mammon and other economists would call this an inflection point of supply and demand. Just quick Mammon reference.
Oh, absolutely. Warranted. But Ben, I'm speaking of procedures that an insurance company may or may not deny. I mean, there is part of this, the idea of a fecal transplant as a way of preemptively improving your gut bacteria. That would probably be considered by an insurance company to be medically unnecessary and therefore, paid for by the individual. But in the case of this C. diff situation, that would be a life-saving thing. So it's interesting how this kind of occupies those two spheres simultaneously.
Yeah, man. Our inflection point may well be a moment where we have more people who need good poop and fewer people who possess good poop, which is odd to think about. But, then there's the other question. What if the bad stuff evolves? The call is coming from inside your butt.
No.
It's the cognitive neighborhood of dystopia, right? We talk about this. Bacteria is constantly evolving. Gut bacteria these microbes are linked to good health, but then they also can be linked to autoimmune disorders, metabolic syndrome, IBS. A lot of this is currently explained by something called leaky gut.
Oh, yeah. I remember hearing about this. This leaky guts, by the way, and this is great. It's just a callback to the Karen Reed trial, if anyone watched that, where some of the officers were sending text messages to each other about Karen Reed and about the symptoms that she had of some of those things you just described, like chronic inflammatory responses in your guts. It was just horrible. Sorry, that's the last thing I thought about when I thought about this stuff. But leaky gut syndrome is where some of the bad bacteria actually goes in to your body. It's not contained within that system. I'm imagining the colon, the intestines. It goes through into your, through the cell walls and stuff that's supposed to protect you.
Can get into your organs, can get into other parts outside of the digestive factory line, right? Mm-hmm. And this can create these chronic inflammatory responses that are part and parcel of a variety of diseases. Apparently, a lot of bacteria is indeed constantly evolving. Noah Palm, assistant professor of immunobiology at Yale, conducted this study where they found that when a lot of the bad bacteria is evolving, it's becoming more pathogenic because it's evolving to do just what you described, Matt, to migrate across the gut barrier, to persist in any organ you can imagine.
Yeah, and like you said, sometimes it could be in there for ages, and it's not hurting the host, the human being that is hanging out in, but as soon as it exits that host, other people better watch out.
Yeah, exactly. So now we have a third challenging factor at play. Fewer healthy people. 1, more people in need of fecal transfer. 2, and now the bad gut buddies are growing tougher and they're becoming more focused. They're scoping in. I feel like it's such a pickle, you guys, because C. diff spreads and proliferates in places with the most vulnerable people, hospitals, elder care facilities. The antidote may become the poison when we're talking about antibiotics, you know?
Exactly. We've said it before on the show, but it's what killed my grandfather. He went into the hospital, had a big procedure, and ended up getting an infection that was untreatable, and it killed him. And it was this stuff. It was this like terrible bacteria that it ends up giving you sepsis, where the bacteria, the infection is now in your bloodstream, and there's nothing you can do.
It's terrible, man.
Sorry for that downer. The good thing, there are good things though here, right? The FDA, while this whole thing, like poop transplants are a bit
new car smell.
It's got a new car smell, and it's not like you can go to your doctor that you see every day and say, "I need one of these," or even request one. Or it's very unlikely your insurance is going to do anything for you with those. But there are products that Big Pharma is coming up with that the FDA has approved over the past 2 years. Mm-hmm. So, like, there could be a silver lining here.
Mm-hmm. Silver gut lining. Yeah, the FDA has approved FMT primarily to treat recurrent C. diff infections. So when other stuff doesn't work, you can go for this. It's not illegal to do so. The second nugget of good news is the more we're learning about the human gut, the more potential promise we see in fecal matter transfer. Noel, to your earlier point about the idea of it affecting mood or influencing behavior, there appears to be some scientific sand to that. As Dead Prez once observed, maybe we should let our food be our medicine.
100%.
Yeah, man. Look up, I want to hear some verses that use these two terms, Ribiota and Faust. Those are the two FDA-approved drugs that are usually given rectally, I think.
Oh my gosh, is there a group somewhere out there, a hip-hop group called Big Pharma? Oh, Big Pharma. Sorry, Big Pharma is my nickname for the Parmesan cartels.
That's the Parmesan cheese trade, yes.
So let us know if you have a Big Pharma mixtape on the way. Love them or hate them, humans have a pretty great track record of creating wonderful things from gross circumstances. Again, not medical advice. Please, just on a common sense note, folks, don't try to put other people's poop inside you. And whenever you can, if possible, try to avoid putting your poop inside other people, unless the doctor co-signs it.
You down with OPP?
Yeah, you know me.
Went a little long this evening, but we would love to hear your thoughts, especially if you have experience with C. diff or if you are a medical professional who has experience with FMT. We try to be easy to find online.
You can find us on the internet at the handle Conspiracy Stuff, where we exist on Facebook with our Facebook group Here's Where It Gets Crazy, on YouTube, where we have video content galore for your enjoyment, and on X, FKA Twitter, on Instagram and TikTok. However, we are Conspiracy Stuff Show.
Our number is 1-833-STDWYTK. That's a phone number. Call it. It's a voicemail system. When you call it, give yourself a nickname and let us know if we can use your name and message on the air. If you've got more to tell us that can't fit in a 3-minute voicemail, you want to go on and on about open biome, well, why not send us an email? We are
the entities that read every piece of correspondence we receive. It doesn't have to relate to humanmicrobes.org, but we would love to read any studies you find. You can also just send us some observations, jokes, leads for new episodes. Why did the man bring toilet paper to the party? Because he's a party pooper. Conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.